Welcome back to another Learn PowerShell video. Today we're going to be covering day 6 of the Advent of Code. So this one kind of beat me up quite a bit. I almost gave up because my script, I had let it run 3 times for excess of 30 minutes, and finally it finished after probably about 52 minutes, 53 minutes, somewhere in there. And I tried rewriting it, I don't know, a dozen times or more before I finally went to the Reddit to look up some other people's solutions and read some of the problems that they were having as well. Turns out a couple other people had some similar issues and then rewrote their code to simplify it and gave me a lot of good ideas and taught me as well. So I'm going to kind of give you guys a little rundown of what I did once we jump over to VS Code and show you their simplified solutions and kind of explain why it is simpler, because I think that's the key here is to learn how to do things better if you're already doing them, or to learn them and learn them the right way or most efficient way. So what we have here is we have some lanternfish, and there's X number of days until the lanternfish creates a new lanternfish. So there's some rules that a lanternfish can only spawn a lanternfish once every 7 days. So 0 to 6. And one lanternfish might have 2 days left till it creates another lanternfish, one other might have 4. So they're going to vary based on where they are in space-time right now. And so you have to add 2 more days before a new lanternfish can then join this repetitive cycle. So the first time that a lanternfish is born, effectively, it's going to take 8 days instead of the 6, or 9 instead of the 7, but we're counting from 0, so let's say 8. So here's some logic just to kind of walk you through it. You're 0 on day 0, then the next day that fish at 0 becomes a fish at 6, and a new fish is spawned with a timer of 8, which is right here. This is really the only important logic you need. Every day their timer is going to increment or decrease by 1. So a lanternfish resets the timer to 6, not 7, because of the 0. So again, we start at 0 with our counting. So if we had these lanternfish, these are 5 different lanternfish at different stages of their spawning cycle. So you have one at 3 days, one at 4, one at 3, one at 1, and one at 2. So this is the initial state. Here's kind of what it looks like. You can follow this down. So you can see this first fish goes 3, 2, 1, 0, boom, and there's new fish down here. But there's also a new fish for this one who's also at 6 now. And before that, we had this guy have a new fish, and before that, we had this guy that had a new fish. So you can see this. This is only 18 days. So after 18 days and only 5 fish, our total is going to look like we have 5,934 fish. Sorry, after 80 days. But after 18, you have this many. But after 80 days, you would have 5,934 from these initial 5. So it is exponentially increasing at a rapid rate. So find a way to simulate lanternfish, and how many lanternfish would there be after 80 days? So you can see here that my answer was 362,346. That was correct. I got part 2. So I'm going to jump over to VS Code and let's copy this so we don't have to keep bouncing back and forth, so we can verify afterwards. Alright, so here we are in VS Code, so our answer is going to be this. And many thanks to Soju Master and RM Bolger, because they were the two that posted solutions that I definitely acclimated to the most out of anything else that might have been on Reddit. I personally like both of them, but I like that Soju outlined that his initial code took the 70-something minutes, I think is what he said, and he knew that that was too long and simplified it. And if you've read the postings for the Advent of Code, it says that every bit of code that you're running for a solution should be run in under 15 seconds, even on 10-year-old hardware. So that's just something to note. So if your solution is taking you longer than that, you're probably not using the most optimized solution. All right, so let's get started. So we have our puzzle input, so let's go ahead and bring that in. So for this puzzle, I've already broken it out. I split it by commas and then replace the commas with nothing, just to get this nice little array that we have going. And what I originally did was I created a reverse hash table lookup that had the days that someone was in the cycle with the number of fish in that cycle. So I would just increment the number of fish and keep moving them down further. However, when you're using a hash table like this, it exponentially gets out of control. Obviously, you guys saw that the number of fish is insane, and this number of fish is crazy. And the total number of fish in our puzzle right now is only 300. So, you know, it's just insanely rapid. So when you're trying to modify a hash table, especially because it's not ordered, you have to actually call the individual value that you're trying to move. Then you need a spacer value because you don't want to overwrite a value that already exists. It's just crazy. So what was proposed was that you create an array that can handle 64-bit integers, and then you just kind of move things around and add things where they should be added. So what we're going to do is create this long variable called fishies. And if you guys want to see, I will post the documentation on this class. So what you do is just put 8 zeros in here, one for each placeholder. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think that's, I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. So let's just make sure that we have 0 to 8. Let's say 8. So 7, and that's 0 to 8. So we're good. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let me just copy this, and I think I'm actually still one short. Let me check though. I am. I'm still one short. So that 8 does need to exist because it's 9 days and 7, or 6 and 8 respectively. Okay. So what we can do now is just kind of plug in our numbers accordingly and go from there. So what we're going to do is just kind of build a function here, and we're going to actually plug this all into the function because I don't want to keep passing in the puzzle to the function. It's just not necessary. You can just have it contained in the function. We have not built a function on this channel yet, so I'm going to kind of walk you guys through this, and we will discuss functions in a video very soon. So I'm going to call my function show fish cycle. Show is an approved verb in PowerShell, and if you're wondering, you can just do get verb, and you can see all the verbs. I can go through here to show you that show is, and it's right here. It's a common verb. So we can just use this verb as the verb we're going to use, and then I'm just going to say call it a fish cycle. You can really call it whatever you want, but we're going to call it fish cycle. So we are going to pass a parameter in here, and I will show you why when we get to part 2, because I don't like repetition. And as you've seen, a lot of these problems that we've done previously, there's not much to change between part 1 and part 2. So if you make part 1 originally into a function, you can just reuse that same bit of code, changing whatever the parameter is that you need to change, and go from there. So we're going to call our parameter, first off, it's going to be an integer, and we're just going to call it days, because we need to figure out how many days this is going to run for. And we are going to make this mandatory because it is mandatory. We can't just give it no days. That wouldn't work. So days isn't going to be something that we hard code. We're just going to pass in days, let the puzzle run because the puzzle is static. This isn't going to change. This isn't going to change because we know we're on an 8-day timer. If we weren't sure, we could pass this in as a long array, but we don't need to because we know it's not going to change. So from here, what we need to do is now every day that exists, we're just going to move some items around. So you haven't really seen me use for loops. We can run this as a for each, but a for loop seems to do it faster than a for each loop did when I did some testing by a few milliseconds. Not a big deal, but it will be when we get into more days. So we're just going to say a day, and we're going to initialize our starting point at 0, like we do. And we're going to say that for as long as the day is the day number is less than the total number of days, then we're going to increment day by 1. And that's just going to count from 0 to 79, which is 1 to 80, and count up all of our fish that hatch. So what we're going to say is our number in 0 is fishies 0. And I actually need to add our fish into the fishies counter. So right now we just have this puzzle, that has, just to look at the first 11 fish at their day counter in it. So this is what day they're on in their cycle. None of them are at 0. They're all at 1 or something else. I've already looked. It wouldn't really matter though, but I'm just saying none are at 0. So for every entry in our puzzle, what we're going to do is for each object, and we're going to say that our fishies, and we're going to figure out where they are in their cycle, and then we're going to add that to 1. So what this is going to do is, like we have a reverse hash table, but we're not actually going to have to call, there's no key and value pair. So this position is actually now the key. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way down is the key, and this is the value. But we don't actually have to call a key and value pair, which will save us a lot later in the memory usage. And this is why I am thanking those two fine people from Reddit, because my hash table was really, really bogging things down, and again, that was not the efficient way to do things. So we'll figure out our num in 0 is whatever fishies are today on 0. So for 1 through 8, what we're going to do is a for each on that, and we're going to say that our fishies and whatever, is in today, or whatever day it's on, is actually going to move down a day in the line. And you retain 0 because 0 actually becomes two different things, right? So something that's on 0 becomes a fish on day 6 and a fish on day 8. So it's very key that you retain what's in 0 right now, because what's in 1 is going to overwrite that. What's in 1 is going to overwrite 0, and you can't do this for two settings at once. So what we're going to do, since we have day 0 fishies retained, we're going to say that for any fish on day 0, we're going to add that to whatever fish happen to be on day 6, which is going to change because the fish that were born are also going to hit a day 6, not just the fish that just had a fish. And whatever fish are on day, or are going to be on day 8, we're going to say that those are the fishies that are just born. So fish that happen to be on 0 yesterday are on 6 and 8 today. It's 2 entries. So then we're just going to skip back however many fish that we do have. It's pretty simple. So we'll go ahead and do this, and I'm going to run it as a function. So when I hit this, nothing is going to happen. So all I've done is load up this bit of code to this command, show fish cycle. And because I return the number of fish, now I can do something with that. And actually, I don't return the number of fish. I return the total array that exists right here after the entire completion, but I have to plug in the days. So let's run show fish cycle, and let's give it a days of 80, and let's just see what that looks like. What did I miss? Fishies 8 equals fishies. Oh, I can't add fishies. I need to add the number 0. So let's try this again. So here we go. So here we have our total number of fish. And again, I've said it a lot. I'll keep saying it. If you make mistakes, don't get discouraged. Just figure out where they are, because you can read the error, and see if you can figure it out. If you can't, ask somebody. Go to Google. Go to Reddit. Just reach out and ask. So now we need to figure out what the total number of fish is based on the fish that are all in these days. So we can just do this, measure object, and figure out the sum. And if I do this, remember we get that ugly table back. So we just need the sum, so let's just step into that and get sum. And 362,346 happens to be our answer. So now let's bounce back over to Advent of Code. Perfect. And for day 2, what we need to do is just increase the number of days to 256. So this was my answer. So let's go ahead and get back over to VS Code and plug that one in up here. And now let's just run the same exact thing, except let's just give it days of 256. Was that not right? Was it not 256 days? No, it is. What did I just copy? Oh, I copied their answer, not mine. So let's go back and look at this. And that is that. Just so you can compare easily. So there's nothing that we needed to do extra for part 2. Just change the number of days, which by putting it in a function, we've eliminated any rework for. We just update one thing and we're done. So functions are absolutely imperative to wrap your code in so you can make things repeatable. And it's as simple as just declaring function and giving it a name and then wrapping all of your code in that function. And just figuring out which parameters you need to declare outside of that function, like the number of days in this case. And you just pass the days as a parameter and you're good to go. And there's a lot more things you can do in these parameters. You can validate certain sets. You can make sure that people are only giving you integers, like in this case. So if I try to change this to a and rerun this bit of code, it'll tell me that a is not an integer and kick me out. So that's day 6. I am looking forward to recording day 7, but in the meantime, I am going to record a fun video to talk about loops and statements in a very, very unique way. I'll talk to you soon.